Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I had to confirm that for a second. Everything's kind of running together here on day two. Hope everybody's had a great morning. My name is Andrew Richardson. I am the Vice President of Analytics and Marketing Science at Tinuiti. Tinuiti, I'll give you a little bit of explanation of who we are here in just a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm Arthi. I work with Andrew at Tinuiti. I manage a team of amazing analysts who help support our clients with reporting, insights, and strategy. We run into a lot of data challenges every day, and I'm really excited to be able to show you later how exactly we use Tableau Prep to solve for that.
Cool. So we've got a little bit of an agenda today. We'll just walk through some of these things and make sure that you get out of the session today what you need to get out of it, and these are the things that we're actually going to cover off on. Arthi's going to take you through the really important stuff. I just get to kind of give you the setup of why Tableau Prep for us, why Conductor, and some of the things that we're doing with it. Arthi's going to get into a live demo and show you some examples. If you're not a marketer, that's okay. The concepts and everything that we're going to talk about today is still going to be very relevant and very familiar. If you are a marketer, I think that this is going to resonate a lot with you, and so we want to make sure that again, you get a lot out of it. We'll have time for questions at the end as well, so we want to make sure that you have questions. We get those answered for you. We love answering questions. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about, and this is kind of the most boring part of the presentation. I got to walk, I'm sorry. About Tinuiti and kind of who we are and how we think about our business and our clients and how we execute for them. So we are a digital marketing agency. We span the gambit of everything from paid search and paid social to Amazon and display and everything in between. This is how we think about how we execute for our brands, right? And this is not, anything earth-shattering or mind-altering or anything like that, but I think it's a good setup for you to understand how we think about ourselves and how we think about the customers that we work with. These are some of our company highlights in terms of who we are, and I'm sharing this because I think that for you to understand whether you're at an agency or a brand that's very small, or you're at a gigantic agency or a very large brand, you can kind of see where we fit in terms of our size and our scale and kind of who we are there. What's unique about us at Tinuiti, we believe, is our people-driven foundation and how we actually work with our internal teams and in turn with our clients. This flywheel on the right-hand side is a lot of how we kind of live and breathe. We have over 95% retention rates for clients and over 95% retention rates for employees. If you work in the agency space or you work with agencies, you know that is extraordinarily rare. If you're at a brand, you know how quickly and often those things turn over. And one of the reasons why we believe that we've been so successful in that retention is because of how we have a people-driven foundation and we put our people first. We make sure that they're happy, that they have a culture of ownership within the organization. We talk about entrepreneurship, not entrepreneurship, and how everyone has a piece of the business as we kind of move forward. And that in turn allows us to retain talent. That retention of talent then turns into clients being very happy with us. We have extraordinarily high client and employee NPS scores that we measure every single year. And that client relationship and the results that are driven out of that, then clients grow their business with us, right? They're secure in that. They know that they can get what they need from us. That then turns into us being able to reinvest in things like Tableau Prep and Conductor and growing our relationships with Tableau and other partners. And then that goes back into that culture of ownership. So we think that this is unique within the industry and something that we don't see a lot at a lot of other agencies. And so we just wanted to kind of kick that off so you understand where we're coming from. We've won a lot of awards as it pertains to kind of best place to work and things of that nature, which we're really, really proud of. So if you're a marketer, you know this problem where you have different data sources from your email program to your internal data to your paid search data to your social data. This is a sample, not all, but a sample kind of broken into different channels of data partners, ad vendors, et cetera, that we work with. This obviously can be a pretty large problem if we are now trying to understand and figure out how do we report on this, how do we analyze on this, how do we create dashboards that are meaningful and tell a story when we're trying to get this level of data cleaned, normalized, put together in a way that actually makes sense. So to give you some background on this, A couple of years ago, we did some analysis prior to really bringing Tableau on full time and being able to do what we're going to show you some of today. This is the amount of hours that we were spending every year on data preparation and analysis. Sorry, data preparation and reporting. 156,000 hours across the company. At the time, we were a lot smaller than we are now. We've made a few acquisitions in the last couple of years, but this number is a pretty daunting number for us to think about. And if you're at an agency and you understand what your billable rate is, or if you're at a brand and you know how much you pay your agencies, this is a lot. We do not actually bill on or talk about hours very much at all, but this is something that we measured and wanted to understand. What that actually was for us looked like this. So of that 156,000 hours, we were spending the stereotypical 80% almost versus 20% of actually doing analysis. This is a lot. This is a big deal. Some of you are nodding your heads right now going, yep, this is exactly where we sit. We have the same problem. Good, right? You're not alone, just so you know. But what we've been able to do with some of our data partnerships with Tableau Prep and Conductor and some fantastic people like Arti and her team is where we've been able to implement this kind of full circle now looks more like this. Obviously a stark difference. We've been able to measure this. We're keeping track of this where it's appropriate for us to do so. That allows us now to be able to return more for our clients than what we have been in the past, and ultimately go back into that culture of ownership and keeping our clients happy and them growing their business with us as a result of us providing better value, more analysis, less data munging and data prep because of some of the tools that we've got at our disposal. So what does this mean? Arti's going to get into a live demo now to show you some of the ways that we've actually done this that I think you're going to find really impactful. And again, we'll have some question time at the end. So wanted to give you that setup. Thanks. It's all yours.
All right, so now to the fun part of the presentation, the demo. So with this, I'm going to take you through the whole process from all of the raw marketing data sources all the way to getting to insights that you can take action on. So before we get into that, let me just set up the framework for how we approach this process. So I guess I skipped a step in the previous slide and I say where we start is the raw data sources, because that's not where you start. Where we always start is by asking our clients, or you could ask yourself if you're the brand, what your business goals are, right? And it's so important to start there because an interesting insight doesn't actually have very much value if it's not driving towards the business goals. For the scenario we're going to go through today, let's assume that we're working with a client who's really focused on increasing the efficiency of their marketing dollars to generate more revenue. So the more tactical sort of question that comes out of that business goal is, where should I be spending more? Where should I be spending less? And then that then lets you get more efficient. Quick framework on how you can approach that question. So first, deciding on a KPI. This is really going to depend on the goals of your client and where they're at. It can also change depending on the time of the year. If you're working with somebody who's really focused on growth, you might be looking at a metric like cost per reach. In this example, we're going to be looking at return on ad spend because the client's really focused on getting more efficient with driving revenue. Second, once you have your KPI, that's when you need to decide which segments you actually want to include in your analysis. And if it's in your analysis, it needs to be in your data set, which is why this is relevant, right? So the key thing with the segments is that really you need to pick segments that you can act on. If there are segments that are interesting but aren't something you can actually pull levers with, they might not be worth including for the highest impact analysis. So in the paid media space, typically segments like campaign type, geo, are levers that we can pull by adding bid modifiers, changing budgets. So that's where we're going to start. And then finally, the last piece is kind of obvious, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Once you know which segments are higher performing, which segments are lower performing, the actual action that gets taken is that you then shift that spend from the lower performing to the higher performing segments. So just quick framework, and then back to the overall flow. So once you have your question, you have your KPI, you have your dimensions, now you're ready to actually start getting those data sources. And with marketing, and I'm sure across many industries, data sources come from many different places, right? It's not that everything arrives ready for analysis, ready for visualization, and that's where at Tinuiti we use Tableau Prep extensively to really help with that cleaning and stitching together process, and that's what we're going to walk through today. Once you have that clean data, then you're ready to build dashboards and do that analysis to actually get to that answer to that initial question. All right, I'm not going to go through this list, but just wanted to highlight data is messy. Right? We all know that. All of these steps here actually are in that flow that we're going to be going through today. And also, I want you to keep this list of steps in mind and think through if you were trying to accomplish all of those in Excel, with VLOOKUPs and XLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs and writing VBA scripts, how long that would take and how at the end of all that you wouldn't even necessarily get to something that's automatable and scalable. So my goal today is really to show you how easy it is to get there with Tableau Prep and how quick it is to be able to scale to even creating these complex processes just all within Tableau. So last thing before the demo itself, we're working with a marketing question, so we're going to be working with marketing data. So today, the data sources we're going to be working with are going to be coming from Facebook, Google, Bing. So, all right. To the demo. Let me figure out how to switch this. All right, perfect. So we're starting here. These are just all the raw data sets, right? So they're at the date, geo, and campaign level. So those are the dimensions that I'd mentioned earlier. So you might think, all right, so I have all of my raw data from all the different places I know I need to get data from. What do I do next in Tableau Prep, right? So I always like to think about what I want the end result to be first. So in this case, I know that I need one unified data set with columns like date, the geo dimensions like state or country, campaign type, and then because I'm interested in return on ad spend, I know that I'm going to need spend and revenue. So I know that's my final goal, and then if we look at the starting points here, so let's look at Facebook, for example. So we have a lot of those columns in here, right? We have date, we have campaign, we have state, we have the metrics. So the challenge is that those columns aren't called the same thing across all of the data sources. So the first step, and this seems super trivial, is honestly just getting the naming aligned. Because once you have the naming aligned, that gives you the framework to go forward and get that all into one data set. So I'm just going to show you an example. So let's go with Bing. So let's say for my convention for the final data set, I want campaign to be called campaign. So in Bing, it's called campaign name. So in Tableau Prep, it's literally as easy as just double-clicking it, hitting campaign, done, right? So you would go through and do that for all of the columns to get them aligned. I'm just going to finish it just for Bing. So I know for spend, I want that to be cost. And for state, I want that to be region. So again, this seems really trivial, but there's actually a lot of power even in this really simple renaming step, because it's not that you're doing it just that one time. You're then able to have that be in your flow every time you're pulling in data, right? So there's a lot of power in being able to scale that and automate that, and in such a quick way. The other thing I just want to call out for those of you who may not be as familiar with Tableau Prep, if you go to this Changes tab, at every step, every little change that you make gets fully documented. So this is great not just for your own workflow, but also when you're passing this on to somebody else who needs to go in and edit the flow, or to somebody else who wants to understand what's even going into this data set into the first place. It's very easy to go through all the steps and see what exactly is being done to that source data. Yep. So let's move on. So at this point, I just skipped all the steps where basically in each data set just went through and renamed the columns. So nothing more than that. So as we were doing this for Facebook, what I realized is that we're missing a column. So if you look, for example, at the Google data for geo, we have region, we have metro, we have country. But if you look at Facebook, we have region, but we don't have country. And for this particular analysis, we want to make sure that we just look at the US. So without having country, there's no way to do that. So with Facebook, this is just a marketing nuance. Facebook doesn't let you pull state and country together in the same data set, which is ridiculous, but it is what it is. But that's why we have to get clever, right? In the Tableau Prep, it's very easy to use sources from other places to layer in to add those columns that you need. So in this case, I'm going to keep it very simple. So we know we have region, we want to add country. We have other data sources here that have region and country together. So the quickest way to get to that is to create a mapping of region and country and use that to basically add country to our Facebook data set. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to click on the Google data set, which I know has region and country. I'm going to click the plus sign, just create an aggregation. And what I'm basically doing is creating a region lookup. So I'm going to bring in region to group it. I'm going to take the max of country. And the reason I'm taking the max is that I want to make sure that this lookup stays at a region level. I don't, like, for example, if there's an Alaska in the US and the Alaska somewhere else, I don't want that to create duplication in our data set. So just to be safe, I'm making sure that this lookup is at one row for each region. And then now that we have that lookup with Tableau Prep, I can just drag that right onto Facebook, because that's where I know I want to add country. I'm going to choose to use a left join down here because I don't want to lose any of my Facebook data. And honestly, that's it. We've added country. So with Tableau Prep, in the join interface, you can very quickly see where there are issues with that join. So you can see right here, actually, one that immediately pops out. In Google, DC is called District of Columbia. In Facebook, it's called Washington District of Columbia. So in Tableau Prep, fixing it is as easy as just adding a step in the Facebook data. And I'm going to go find that value, Washington District of Columbia, and just rename it to District of Columbia. Done. And if we go back to the join, it's not an issue anymore. So now on the Facebook side, we're all good. On Google, you can see there are some weird regions in there that really should be California. But for now, I'm just going to let that slide. But for Facebook, now all the regions have a country match. So we've added country. That's really an example of the power of aggregations and how you can use them to add different levels of detail to your data. So moving on. All right, so I skipped a step, but I'll just quickly explain what happened. So after that last step, all that's been done is that we basically combined all of those data sets that now have the same names for the same columns into one big union data set. So we just vertically stacked all of those. So we're already at a point now where we have a unified data set. So the only steps needed are cleaning steps that sort of apply to everybody, right? So one nuance with this client is that they're based in Europe, but we're running paid media for them in the US. But because of that, some accounts are in euros, some accounts are in USD. But in order to be able to compare return on ad spend apples to apples, we need them all to be in the same currency. So this might be something that's very difficult to accomplish somewhere else, but with Tableau, again, super easy. So at Tinuiti, typically, we would have a currency exchange rate table in a database so that it's fresh every day. So that's, right now, this is just a static file, but typically it would be a table that we're able to tap into, so it's kept fresh. So all this table is the date and then the exchange rate on that date for euros to USD. So in order to actually apply this to your data, all you'd have to do is, again, drag to join it in to your now master data set. Again, I'm going to do it, keep it as a left join so that we don't lose any of the data on the left. I'm going to join on date. Okay. And then after we have that, to actually, I think it's still just loading. Just going to keep going. All right, so to actually apply the rate, all you would do is, sorry, I might have gone a little bit too fast, create a calculated field. And for example, so we know we need to update both cost and revenue to get them to be USD. So I'm just going to show you how I would do it for cost. So let's update our cost calculated field. And I'm just going to say, all right, so when the currency is euros, let's apply that rate. So when it's euros, cost times that rate. If it's not euros, let's just keep it as the original cost value. And done. You've made that conversion in a way that's automatable and scalable, and now you're able to compare that metric apples to apples. Okay. All right, so now we're at a point where we have a master data set, we've converted the currency, and there's still one column that seems a little bit dirtier than it should be. So as we scan through these columns, metro area specifically seems to have a lot of different spellings. If I search for New York, for example, right? You can see there's New York, all caps, and then New York, comma, New York. So to be able to actually analyze these different data sources together, we need to make sure that they're grouped appropriately. So there are a couple ways you can tackle this. So one way would be, there are 422 values. It's not a ton. You could manually go through and literally click the different values and group them together when you know they're the same DMA. Luckily, with Tableau, you don't have to do that. So Tableau has algorithms that they've made available that can really help speed up that type of cleaning process. And all of this is assuming that you don't have a mapping table to begin with. If you have a mapping of Google DMA to Facebook DMA to Bing DMA, go ahead and use that. That's the most efficient way. But if it's a case where it's a new grouping that you have to do, Tableau has an algorithm for grouping by spelling. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All you have to do is, I'm actually going to use, so I have two fields here. This is the original metro area field, and all I did is duplicate it in order to do the grouping. So that's what this is. I'm going to go ahead and just click the little menu, group and replace, and I'm going to group by spelling. So when you do that, Tableau, so you can see, but let's quickly go through and see what happened, right? So if I look at Amarillo, you can see the all caps Amarillo and Amarillo, Texas. I probably am butchering the pronunciation of that DMA, but if anybody knows, please correct me. It automatically grouped them together, right? Because the spelling is similar. So now, this isn't going to be perfect. And actually, one more thing, let me show you. So when you do the grouping, you can actually choose for Tableau how aggressive that algorithm is going to be. So right now, it's set at that 2 level. If you move it to the 3 level, you can see that it groups more of the values together. So it gets a little, like we went from 278 final values to 210 distinct values. So you can kind of play around and see for your data set which one yields the most accurate base result. The downside with making it more aggressive is that you might get things grouped together that don't actually need to be grouped together, so you can play around with that for your data. But this is a great starting point to then be able to QA this and actually get to the right grouping a lot quicker than if you had to group all of those 400 and something values by yourself. And let me show you how to QA that. And again, aggregations are amazing, and that's what I love to use for any type of QA within prep flows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that grouped metro area, right? And then I'm going to see for each grouped metro area, how many of the original metro values are there, just to see that spread of kind of how they got grouped. And we can see for the most part, it seems like grouped metro areas had 2 values within them. So I would go back and verify this, but for the most part, let's assume that if there's 2, that means that it was grouped correctly. If there's more than 2, those are the ones we need to go back and fix. So now, let me go and do one of those. So for 5, I'm just gonna look at 5. So Atlanta, for example, has 5 values that got grouped under it. So something probably there with the default algorithm grouped other values that shouldn't have been. So if we go back to that step, all we need to do is go find that grouping. And I'm gonna look up Atlanta to see what happened. So if we look at Atlanta, yep, we can see Albany and Augusta got grouped into Atlanta. So just for those cases where once you QA, you find there's a problem, you can go ahead and manually adjust those. So for Atlanta to fix it, I'm just gonna uncheck Albany and Augusta. And that's it. And again, this is a semi-automated, semi-manual process, but ultimately with Tableau Prep, you're only doing it once, right? Once it's done, it's not even that you'd have to do this again in a different flow, because what you would do is once you have this mapping of the original metro value to the grouped metro value, you can export that as a mapping and use that as a data set in other flows. So this type of categorization only ever needs to be once, and it makes just cleaning very scalable in general. So I'm not going to go through and manually fix all of them in front of you for sake of time, but once we do that, again, I would go to that same QA that I'd set up, comparing the number of values for each group, and you can see we're at the point where all of them are 2. If I want to see that 1, you can see that's just the cases where there wasn't a value for metro, so that's not a problem. So, all right. And I'm not going to go through the rest of this flow in detail because I want to get to the next phase where we actually get to insights. But the rest of this, I mean, we're doing some filtering, aggregating, we're creating some calculated fields just to define some segments. And finally, we're just bringing in a secondary data source with map coordinates to be able to use a hex map in Tableau Desktop. That's just the rest of this. And this final data set that we have here has all those original columns that we talked about. So it has region, has metro area, it has date, it has spend, and it has revenue. So two more things I want to call out just within Tableau Prep before we leave the Tableau Prep part of the demo. So one thing, you might have noticed that in a lot of these steps, I have little notes that are written below the steps. So one great thing that we really leverage with Tableau Prep is just the documentation, right? So, and it's not even just at the step level that you can document. You can actually document each calculated field within each step. So for example, here, if I want to add something here, I can add a description and type in whatever I want to type in to explain why I did what I did, what it means, what it's to be used for, and having that all built in directly into the flow makes it very easy, again, to collaborate and to have others later on understand why you did what you did, just to be able to have that knowledge transfer happen much more seamlessly. It also makes it less likely to make mistakes, right? Because if you understand why something's happening, you then would know not to change something that would affect the way that's working. And then finally, I'm not going to live demo it today, but ultimately, once you have this flow, the idea is that you would leverage it ongoing in an automated way, right? That's where the real benefit is. So typically at Tinuiti, I mean, right here, I'm just using static Tableau extracts for the data sources, but typically we'd be tapping into a database so the data is kept fresh. And once you have the flow built, all you have to do is go ahead and just publish that to your server environment or Tableau Online environment. And from there, you can use Conductor if you have that add-on to just schedule refreshes daily so your data is always fresh and always ready to use. All right. So now on to the dashboard part of the demo. So let me first show you what this even is. So, all right, so we have sort of a partially filled out dashboard here. This particular view is focused just on understanding return on ad spend by state. Like, that's all this is doing, I'm trying to answer. So here on the top left, we just have a quick visual representation of which states are less efficient, which states are more efficient. And this lower part really lets you sort of explore the trends for each state. So for example, if I hover on California, I'm going to see what the spend share is, how their return on ad spend has trended over time versus the national average, and this just allows that exploratory view. And all of this is built from that same data set that was outputted from that prep flow. So just thinking about sort of what might make sense to fill in here. Right now, it's very easy to see what the efficiency is of each state, but it's not as easy to understand where you'd be able to have the most potential impact by making optimizations, right? And ultimately, a lot of that's just tied to the volume in those states. So if you're spending $10 in Wyoming and $1 million in California, you're going to care more about optimizing your spend in California than Wyoming. So let me just quickly show you like how we would add that. So I'm just going to start with this ROAS by market worksheet, duplicate it. I'm just going to call it spend by market. And let's title that to where is the potential impact the greatest? All right, and then to actually change this, all you would do is bring in, oh, I called it cost, so cost it is. Just replace ROAS with cost instead. I'm just gonna make this color scale a little bit easier to see and understand the variances. So let's maybe make it like 6 steps or something. All right. And we can drag that right in, remove the legend. And I mean, it's that quick, right? Like that's the power of Tableau, how quickly you can get to views that yield insight without really spending very much time at all. So one thing, as I'm looking at this that's catching my eye, oh, did not set up something correctly. Oh, it's because we have parameter actions that are affecting that also need to be applied. I will skip that for now, but let me actually, yeah, but let me just remove this guy for now. All right, so with this, one thing that's immediately catching my eye is that there's this 2 nulls, right? And actually we can see that right here, or there's 4 nulls here. And my first question is, why are there any nulls at all? Because when we brought in the hex coordinates, those had every state in the US, and theoretically, this should only have all the states in the US. So why is there any Why are there any data points where there are null? So I'm just going to quickly investigate that. So let's bring in the region column that we have, and let's bring in the hex region column that we have to see where the disconnect is. And if we look at this and scroll down, we can immediately see, actually let me just filter on null to see where that's happening. It's those pesky Google DMA values, right, that didn't get cleaned up and didn't get converted to California. So I'm just going to move back to the presentation really quickly. Move forward a bit. All right, so that was a little bit scripted, I'll admit, but I mean, ultimately, this is my favorite thing about Tableau Prep, and that's 100% genuine. Like iteration is so easy with Tableau Prep. Because ultimately, when you build something, it's not going to be 100% right the first time. I mean, it could be, but chances are there might be something that you want to add, something you want to tweak, and you might not realize it until you actually start analyzing the data or until you actually start trying to visualize it. So with Tableau Prep, the nice thing is because it's so quick to make those changes and those cleaning steps, you can just have that flow be making the prep flow, going to Tableau Desktop, looking at the data, trying to understand it. As soon as you find something, go back to the prep flow, make a change, publish it, and then you have immediate access to go and continue doing whatever you were doing instead of having that delay and that lag between when you're working and having to wait for those updates to be made to your data set. So just not having to wait for IT, not having to have that time lag is just hugely impactful. So in this example, let me just go back. And also transparently, transparently like this, when I was actually initially building this demo, I actually did forget to do that. Like that was a real thing that happened, and I really did go back and fix it. So, and I'm just going to show you how quickly it is to fix it. So we know it's a problem with Google, but we have 2 Google data sets. I'm going to go ahead and just make the change after the union, so I don't have to do it twice. So all we would need to do is find region, actually. I find region. If I scroll down, I can see the suspects. Or where are they? Are they not in this flow? All right, let me actually just go to the Google data set, see what's happening there. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to select San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and California, because I know that those are supposed to be in California. And once you select those, you can just group them together. And that's it. You would just do that in the other Google cleaning step also. And once you publish it, you're back to a dashboard where that issue is resolved, right? So we no longer have those nulls. So, all right, so we talked about how easy it is to create these visualizations. But I guess let's get to the most interesting part, which is actually trying to see how we can answer that initial question, right? So where should we be spending more? Where should we be spending less? And I'm just going to start just by trying to use this dashboard that I created. So I'm going to start by looking at, I don't know, Florida. So the reason I'm choosing to look at Florida is that on the right, I can see that it's a higher volume state. So there's probably pretty good potential impact if we make optimizations there. I can also see on the left, just visually, that it's pretty dark orange. There's probably it's significantly below the national average, so it's something to look into. So looking at Florida, I can see since 2018, that return on ad spend has been significantly lower than the national. So it's something that's been consistent over time. There's not something that changed recently. If we look at spend share by campaign type, it's a pretty significant share of national spend. Except for just social, where there's a lower share. And then the key, when you compare that return on ad spend by campaign type versus the national average, we can see that there actually isn't a problem with paid social in Florida. It's only the other channels, specifically, where there's an opportunity to shift that spend somewhere else. So that's just a quick insight. So in Florida, shift search, shopping, and display spend somewhere else that's a higher return on ad spend, excuse me. And another state that jumps out at me is California. They're very clearly the #1 state by volume. And if I look at California, they've also sort of been consistently positive. But looking at California as a whole isn't super interesting because they're a pretty diverse state. There's a lot of opportunities for optimization within that bucket because they are so high volume. So I'm also going to show you how quick it is to just do sort of an ad hoc analysis, right, to understand what's happening in California. So let's filter on California. And now that we're in California, I'm going to bring in the metro areas. I'm just going to exclude where we don't have any data. Bring in spend, because that's always going to be important to see where there's actually a potential for impact. And then I'm also going to bring in return on ad spend. And let's put return on ad spend on color so that we can easily see what's happening. All right, so there's an outlier right away, right at the top. San Francisco, for whatever reason, has a much higher return on ad spend than the other top DMAs in California. So that's immediately something that seems like it could be an opportunity. And this makes me curious now, how does San Francisco compare against the rest of the DMAs in the country? Because it's such a big difference. So if I just take off California, and let me just do a total even, just to look at what it's like versus the national average. And I mean, immediately, San Francisco, it's the number 4 DMA in the country, and their return on ad spend, I mean, just back of the napkin, it's like 40 to 50% higher than that national average. So there's a very clear opportunity here in San Francisco to really increase investment there and capture that demand there that currently isn't being captured. So back to the presentation. All right. All right. So, I mean, we just sort of went through quickly how to get to 2 pretty actionable insights very quickly. And ultimately, that data set that we created could enable a lot more, right? It had a lot of detailed information in there, everything from Google Trends data to different types of trends and individual campaign information, which can really enable a lot more visualizations, a lot more analysis. But even from this really quick look, it was possible to get something insightful right away that answers that initial question. So that really shows the power of using Tableau Prep with Tableau Desktop and having that way to quickly get to those insights in a way that really addresses those business goals. So, I mean, as promised, I took you from that initial big question, what are my business goals, to the final insight that really drives that goal. And that's the framework we try to use at Tinuiti, just because we find that it really helps focus the analyses and also helps make sure that we're answering the right questions and that we're able to do it in a scalable way. So that's all I have. So